Here's something that sounds like a contradiction. The people who feel the most, who understand others most deeply, who can sense what someone needs before it's spoken, are often the same people who have the hardest time protecting themselves. Not because they're weak, not because they don't know better, but because for a highly empathetic person, the act of setting a boundary doesn't feel like self-protection. It feels like causing harm, and that's a very different problem. There's a concept in psychology called empathic over-arousal. It describes what happens when someone's capacity for emotional attunement becomes so finely tuned that other people's distress doesn't just register, it lands, physically, in the body, in the nervous system. For highly empathetic people, someone else's disappointment isn't just observed, it's felt. And when you feel someone else's pain as if it were your own, saying no to them stops feeling like a preference. It starts feeling like an act of cruelty. The first reason highly empathetic people struggle with boundaries is that they experience others' emotions as their own. This isn't a metaphor. Research on mirror neuron systems shows that empathetic individuals simulate others' emotional states at a neurological level. When someone is hurt, disappointed, or upset, a highly empathetic person's brain activates in similar regions as if they were experiencing it themselves. So when they set a boundary and the other person reacts with hurt or frustration, that reaction doesn't stay outside, it comes in. The empathetic person feels the other person's disappointment flooding their own nervous system, and then they face an impossible feeling choice. Hold the boundary and keep absorbing that pain, or release the boundary and make the feeling stop. Most of the time, they release it. The second reason is that empathy and guilt are deeply connected in the same nervous system. For many highly empathetic people, the guilt that follows a boundary isn't proportional to what actually happened. It's amplified, because their nervous system processes both their own discomfort and the perceived discomfort of others at heightened intensity. Psychologist Brené Brown's research on empathy and shame shows a consistent pattern. The same emotional openness that allows deep connection also creates vulnerability to disproportionate guilt. Being the reason someone feels bad, even temporarily, even justifiably, can feel genuinely unbearable. And so instead of sitting with the guilt, they undo the boundary. They explain, they soften, they find a way to take it back. Not because the boundary was wrong, but because the feeling of having caused discomfort becomes too loud to hold. Now pause here for a second. Think about the last time you set a limit with someone, and then almost immediately felt the pull to apologize for it, to make it smaller, to check if they were okay. If that feeling is familiar, this next part matters. The third reason is that for empathetic people, boundaries feel selfish in a way they don't for others. This is where the pattern runs deepest. Most people understand boundaries intellectually as self-care, necessary, healthy, but for a highly empathetic person, that intellectual understanding collides with something older, a deeply wired sense that their role is to attune, to respond, to be available. Psychology calls this the fawn response, a survival pattern where safety is maintained through constant attunement to others' needs and emotional states. For people who develop this pattern early, being responsive to others isn't just a choice. It's woven into how they understand their own value. Setting a boundary interrupts that, and when your sense of worth is tied to your availability, saying no doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels like a betrayal of who you are. So what does psychology actually suggest? It suggests that the path forward for highly empathetic people isn't to feel less. It isn't to become harder or more detached. It's to understand that absorbing someone else's discomfort isn't the same as caring for them, and that a boundary held with warmth is not cruelty, it's honesty. The most empathetic thing you can do for a relationship isn't to have no limits. It's to be honest about what yours are, because a version of you that has no boundaries eventually has no energy left to give. And the people who genuinely matter to you don't need all of you all the time. They just need the real you, and the real you needs protection too.